So I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, good morning from New York. It is hot as balls here.
Yeah, I know my mom's in Philly and she said it's like 115 or something crazy.
Yeah, there's all usually in the winter you have videos of somebody in Chicago throwing up a cup of tea and it freezes. Now like water's evaporating as soon as you like throw that in the air. It's bonkers. My air conditioners are about to explode.
Oh, I know. Well, here, thank goodness, there because I have no air conditioning. I'm glad that we've had like the worst summer.
It is
Well, they say it isn't
terrible
the
in
worst,
London.
but it feels like
I
it.
was just there, of
Yeah,
course, and I
yeah,
was
it feels
reminded
like
there
it.
were some sticky days on the underground.
Yeah, yeah, but it's nice that it gets cool at night, I have to admit.
Yeah.
But all right, enough about the weather. I want to talk about you and the legend who is Philip Duff. And on Lush Life, I always like to know where you grew up. I know you're an Irishman, but a little bit about why you got into the industry, why you fell in love with the industry, why you're still in the industry so much, after starting so many years ago. So tell us a little bit about so where you grew up, as I said, and what got you into the industry.
So I'm from a teeny tiny little town called Skerries, County Dublin, just north of Dublin city centre, a bit north of the airport on the coast. When I say teeny tiny, it's like a population of 5,000 people. And I got into the industry because I got a part-time job working weekends in a local bar when I was 15 years old. And I did that because the previous 2 summers I had picked potatoes. And if you've never picked potatoes, it's one of the world's shit jobs, right? It's extremely demanding. We were paid, the same as any of the adult men who also worked alongside us. But even at the age of 13, I was like, this sucks. And then I got a job at a bar, which was extremely, extremely advanced. What it was, there were 12 pubs in Skerries growing up, and I think there still are. So going out on a bar crawl was called doing the Stations of the Cross. And the son of one of the bar owners had gone to visit, I think, family in Texas, in America. And he had seen what was then only the second ever TGI Fridays. And he was determined to establish that in his hometown. And he did. And this was the very first knockoff of a Fridays, possibly anywhere in the world, definitely outside America and certainly in Europe. So we had all the, fake Tiffany lamps and we made the cocktails and did flair bartending, but we also had like recipe tests and manuals and stuff. So my first experience in the industry was very regimented with, tests and all that kind of thing. And then I went on to work in, pubs and stuff like that where there was none of it. I remember my first day in a pub in London, walking in and saying, so if you can just give me the recipe manual, I'll be on my way. And they literally laughed in my face. And here I am now. That's it. That's the short version.
All right. Hold on. There's so much to unpack in that. Now, so in this little town, he decided to start this TGIF knockoff in this little teeny town of 5,000. Kudos to him. And so when you got that manual, because I know TGIF was one of the best educations for bartenders of that time. What did you just go, oh my God, I love this. I love this. I love making these cocktails. This is really fun. I mean, were you planning to study something else and you got waylaid into that? What was it at that 15-year-old that excited you to continue?
Well, I thought it was completely normal to have such an amazing amount of training and work in such a fast-paced, because it was a singles bar, basically. Right, just like the Fridays in the USA. And also, my parents were, working class and not even very far up working class. Like they didn't finish high school, that kind of thing. And then to step into this bar, it was like a world of unimaginable glamour and luxury. And I was like, I like this. Like, to give you some idea, my parents would typically eat out no more than twice a year, right? Okay. It was just completely alien to them. And this world just really seduced me. And I continued my studies, high school and college, but I bartended every weekend. In the summer times, I would move to London, which I started doing when I was still 16, and bartend then. I'd either live above a pub or get an apartment. And after I graduated college with a marketing degree, I left Ireland because Ireland's economy was just seriously screwed back then. It always seems to be in a cycle. And
what years are we talking about?
We are talking about 1990,
So
going into 1991
okay.
when I graduated college. And I knew London and I liked London. In many ways, I knew it much better than Dublin, believe it or not, because I had gone over there on my own, not knowing anyone, and been able to get a job and a roof over my head and money in my pocket. So that was a fantastic, amazing experience. And like bartending from the age of 15, we earned the same
especially so young.
as adults.
Especially so young.
Yeah, but again,
Right?
when you're young, you're your own particular type of stupid, and you don't know what you can't do. And London was glamorous and wealthy, and it was everything that Dublin wasn't. Like, opinions are divided, especially if you ask my wife, on whether I ever grew up. But if I did, it probably happened in London. And I had the very good fortune to be there in the early and mid 1990s, which was the birth of what we are now 30 years into, the second golden age of cocktails. And I got to know people like Douglas Ankra, who founded the Lab Bar and invented the Porn Star Martini, and Dick Bradsell, who invented the Bramble and the Russian Spring Punch and the Wibble and the Espresso Martini, and work there at this seminal moment in history. And it was very strange because I worked for TGI Fridays in London. I worked in 5-star hotels. I worked in fancy neighborhood bars. And I had started in the era of flair, and what I kind of saw only a few years later was that was winding down, and this kind of neoclassical cocktail revolution was kicking off with fresh juices and small glasses and old recipes and, you know, late night bars that were stylish but not discos. So at a very young age, I kind of survived an evolution of a lot of my skill set being obsolete and learning new ones. But it's a lot easier to learn about making cocktails properly than it is to learn about the things that Fridays taught me, like free pouring, speed and efficiency, that kind of thing.
Now, you mentioned a lot of really famous people who invented a lot of famous drinks. Did you know at the time that these were the people to associate with? Like, was there that buzz of, oh, he invented the espresso martini, I should go and look and see what he's doing? Did you just fall into these and just happen to be there at the right time?
Well, it's a bit of both.
Or both.
Because you got to backtrack to then, right? There was no cocktail festivals. There was no cocktail seminars or trade shows. No internet. Most people didn't have cell phones back then, actually. I didn't get a cell phone until 1995 or maybe 96 even.
Yeah.
No, probably 97. Holy shit. So if you wanted to learn about something, you'd go to a bar you'd heard of. Somebody say, oh yeah, it's this bar called Alphabet Bar or Lab Bar. And you just go there and kind of look around and hope you could maybe chat to the bartender. You'd steal the cocktail menu. Everyone stole cocktail menus back then. Printed cocktail menus for the younger listeners. And if you heard that there was a guy called Salvatore making a martini with marmalade or something, you'd just have to go along to the bar, hope he's there. And if he's there, hope that he's willing to chat to you about it. And slowly, while we all did that, drinks media began to arrive. So first there was Simon Difford with Class magazine. Class standing for Cocktail Liqueur and Specialty Spirit magazine. And that kind of made the Dick Bradsells and Douglas Ankras into stars, right? Okay. You could, I mean, I knew them personally, but now if you came down to London from Edinburgh or Leeds on the train, you knew where to find them and, you know, how to chat to them. And then the trade shows began adding seminars. First, you were shouting on a microphone in front of a packed trade show, but it got better and better and better, and you had fenced off areas and stuff like that. And you began to hear about people from abroad, and there began to be something I should have said before. Almost all the cocktail books were utter shit back then because they weren't written by bartenders, right? Okay. Once a year, some publishing house would hire some struggling ghostwriter and say, well, we published a book last year with 500 holiday cocktails, so we'd like you to write one now called 1,000 holiday cocktails. And that struggling ghostwriter would go and buy 500 holiday cocktails, which itself was shit because it had been written by somebody just like them, and they would copy that book and throw in some new nonsense. So once there's actually a direct correlation between the penetration of high-speed internet and the rate of growth of the cocktail industry. Once people began communicating on message boards like Drink Boy and emailing, that changed things forever, right? And suddenly we're learning at the speed of light, and you're getting like Dale DeGroff flying to London almost every month or two to be the official trainer for the Match Bar group, for instance. And you're getting the very first bartender guest shifts or exchanges ever So it started slowly, but it really picked up speed. And suddenly, I mean, I didn't think it would last this long. I didn't think we'd still be in the cocktail golden age, but it is not slowing down anytime soon. And I guess I just, by sheer good luck, and due to a shitty economy in my native country, was in London at the right time. It also helps that I'm intelligent and charming and handsome, but mostly it's sheer good luck and timing.
Was there a time or a place where you felt, oh yeah, now it's happening? Like, okay, this place is going to change everything, or this year, I'm seeing a change, not only just behind the bar, but the consumer as well, going, oh yeah, it's happened. I'm in, like, I've seen the top of the wave and now everyone is riding it.
No, it was happening kind of day by day, so you don't notice.
Okay.
Right? There'd be, those Alphabet Bar, Lab Bar. The Atlantic Bar and Grill in 1995 is where I date the modern cocktail revolution to, because it was so large and so influential and so stylish, and it catered to so many people. It educated hundreds, if not thousands, of consumers every night, quite literally on, how to behave in a bar, how to order these drinks. Its opening head bartender was actually Dick Bradsell. So, right. But even at that, we still, Fridays in Haymarket was still packed every night with people drinking Long Island iced teas. It's just that it began to, as what we initially called style bars, there began to be more and more of them. And then they became the majority in London. And then people would be like, oh, there's one in Leeds, there's one in Bristol. So it grew very slowly, really. And, you can only look back and say, okay, the Atlantic Bar and Grill was seismic. The Rainbow Room under Dale DeGroff was seismic.
Yeah, of course.
And then all around the UK and even to Ireland and other European countries, you started hearing like, oh, there's a bar in Hamburg called Lilian. That's the one to go to. There's a bar in Berlin called Green Door. There's a bar in Paris called Candelaria, right? And then suddenly there wasn't just one bar in Paris. There was a dozen, and now we're here today.
Right, of course. So you being in the middle of all of this in London, what took you away? Why did you decide to leave and go to places like the Cayman Islands and Rotterdam and all the other places? Yeah,
because I saw the movie Cocktail, and that was the only career guidance I ever really got. True story. I mean, I was going to be a marketing exec. Before that, I was actually accepted into medical school. Yeah, it's just as well. It turned out there was already another Dr. Phil. But at the time, I was a TGI Fridays trainer, and being a TGI Fridays trainer back then was like having an MBA when there was only one MBA school in the world. You were the most in-demand trainer because that was the dominant form of bartending, and it was lucrative and it was popular and all that. So we were, any Fridays bartenders, always being besieged with job offers. And I did want to run a bar on the beach in the Caribbean, like in the movie Cocktail. So I don't know how I actually picked the Caymans, but I do remember I found, I think, some kind of a phone book of all the hospitality businesses in the Caymans, and I wrote them all a letter. And one of them replied. So I went over there and did some training for a while. Turned out I loved the bar. I hated the Cayman Islands. I had escaped from a tiny town in Ireland, and now I was in a tiny town in the Caribbean. And it turns out that tiny towns are shit, even if they're in the Caribbean. So I was back in London, and this place in Holland, which I dimly was aware of and had never been to, they had wanted me to come and be a trainer for what they said would be a chain of bars before I went to the Cayman Islands. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm off to the Caribbean. Right. I was back in London, and again, pre-email, and I definitely didn't have a cell phone, they tracked me down and offered me the job again. And they said, we're going to start in Rotterdam. And I was like, well, this is a bit of a come down after Grand Cayman. But all right, it's good money. I'll come and I'll be the trainer that you want. But I'm only going to do 3 months. And naturally, I stayed 17 years.
I do love Rotterdam.
Rotterdam
so
is the
I
fucking best. And now, I don't know if you've been lately,
city.
The entire time I lived there, they were building it. Like it was all under construction. The central station, what's called the Cope Road shopping area. I lived on a building site essentially for 17 years, and now it's all finished and it's awesome. Everybody, go to Rotterdam.
Yes, they should. Especially, I stayed on a boat, the SS Rotterdam.
The SS Rotterdam.
It's a hotel.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that you got around by water taxi. And being a Venice lover, I was like, water taxi? And they're only €5. So, yes, I agree. Everyone go to Rotterdam. It is a great, great
Do you want to hear
city.
the story about how I inspired a UK #1 hit?
Of course I do. How could I say no?
So I was a big fan of the House Martins in the beautiful South. And one night I was working in the bar that had taken me to Holland, the Breakaway Cafe in Rotterdam. I was a big square island bar with a pillar, right, on one side that kind of was a blind spot for bartenders. And I was on my own, and it was like a Monday or Tuesday night, and there was hardly anybody there. This guy came in, and he sat behind the pillar, like psycho. And I always remember, he ordered a gin and tonic, then he ordered another gin and tonic, and I went out of the bar to kind of tidy up a little bit. And I had my suspicions. I looked at him, and I'm like, do people tell you look like Paul Heaton from the House Martins? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, are you? And he goes, yep. Because what he did when he wanted to write songs was he would go and stay somewhere off the beaten path. And Rotterdam was pretty far off the beaten path. So we became friendly, and we took him out and showed him around some of the nightclubs. He actually was shagging one of our waitresses within a week, which is very rock star behaviour. But he went back, and 6 or 7 months later, the beautiful South had their first ever UK #1 with Rotterdam or Anywhere, which he wrote while he was there.
Oh, no way. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
See,
Rotterdam, kids.
Lots happens
cool.
in Rotterdam, exactly.
Rotterdam's the
This
place
is
to
like
be.
a commercial for Rotterdam.
That's it.
All right, so 17 years. We're not going to make you go through every single year, but
There's a few I can't remember at all.
so you're busy training people, educating, which is like what you do. Why did you decide to open your own bar?
Yeah, I must have had a bit too much to drink that day. No, just to go over my career. So a lot of the time I was just bartending. I was the trainer for the Breakaway Cafe, or a trainer. We had several, because we were going to open a chain, and then that never happened. Then another hospitality group hired me, and I worked in several of their concepts. But then I was a full-time consultant, because things had really gotten going by then in the world of cocktails, and I knew how to do it. I knew how to do the old Fridays way. I knew how to do this modern way, because I had been in London, and I knew Simon Difford, and I still subscribed to Class magazine, and I went back to London all the time. So I was being asked to, fly around the world and train and consult so much. I was kind of forced into being a full-time consultant. Like, I remember what tipped me over. I was doing these seminars in Japan, and I'd finish work bartending on Saturday. I'd go home and grab literally 2 hours sleep, get the 6 a.m. flight to Japan, teach seminars Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and fly back to get right off the plane and start my bartending shifts on Thursday. And even at that stage, I was like, this is madness. So I became a full-time consultant, which was great. And one time, what I was doing a lot of, especially for the Balls Company, was when they had foreign bartenders visit, I'd take them out to the bars and restaurants. And I would see the cocktail scene getting off the ground in Amsterdam, right? And I would know that bartenders from London and New York and San Francisco really knew their drinks, and they were drinking the new style drinks. And a bartending colleague from back in Rotterdam had opened a bar in Amsterdam. And it wasn't exactly a cocktail bar, but you could get a good cocktail there. And one time he said to me, he's like, Phil, I'm going to open a bar. Should we do it together? And I said, well, I don't want to open a bar. I want to open a bar restaurant. I want to open something sizable. I don't want to open a cocktail bar. And we spent about 6 months looking for locations. We couldn't find one good, so we left it. And then the same guy got back in touch with me a few months later, and he's like, hey, Phil, do you remember that space we looked at that was too small? I'm like, the tiny space? He said, yeah, I'm opening a speakeasy in there. And I said, Sergey, you've never been to a speakeasy. And he's like, and that's why I'm calling you. So
exactly.
I invested in it as an equal partner, and we opened Door 74, and it was, very quickly, apart from a few nerve-wracking months at the start, it was very successful. It became the first ever Dutch bar in the 50 best list. It still has the highest ever ranking. At one stage, it was number 14. And although I was bought out of the business years ago, I'm very proud to report it's still there. It's part of a hospitality group run by somebody else I know from back in my days in Holland. So very proud of that. It was a lot of trials and tribulations with that bar.
When you had your own bar, was it a different part of your brain you were using? Like, okay, now I'm going to create cocktails. I'm sure you already did that in the past, but you'd been busy educating and consulting. Was it something that you thought, oh, I could do more of this, or I really miss what I was doing before, and I'll just let someone else do this part?
Yeah, well, this happened. What happened with me happened to some other people too. People who were maybe didn't even have as much of a bartending background as me, who became trainers. I'm thinking especially of Tristan Stevenson and Thomas Ask in the UK. They did so much training for Diageo. They became expert at all these modern techniques, and then they opened their own bars like Pearl and Worship Street Whistling Shop and all that. And that's really what I did, because as a consultant, in theory you're teaching, but if you've got half a brain, you're always learning too. And my clients had been flying me round the world, and I'd been observing very closely what had been happening in Sydney and New York and other places. So opening the very first truly serious cocktail bar in the Netherlands was just the culmination of all of that. It wasn't a burning need or a want to do it. It's just like, okay, this works everywhere else. There's people in Amsterdam, I know them. When they go to London, they go to the Atlantic Bar and Grill in the Lab, but back home, they're drinking beer and shots, right? Everybody passes through Amsterdam. This is going to work. Everybody, by the way, thought I was mistaken in this assumption, including my business partner and my head bartender. They were absolutely not sold on the idea of a locked door and reservations and this, but I showed them.
You showed them. Now, back to your consulting, Liquid Solutions. When you say that now there's so many consultants, drinks consultants, bar consultants. When you think that you started that, what was it, 2011 or so? That's really early. I mean, were you finding that you were just busy, or people didn't really understand what bar consulting was? Did you have to sell them on it? Or you just, the minute you put up your shingles, no, I don't want you to get shingles. They were just coming. Kind of, tell me the early days of consulting.
Yeah, again, pure luck on my part that I was working at a Fridays place and then actually at Fridays, because if you worked at a big busy Fridays, almost every shift, definitely every week, somebody would come in and ask you to come and train their bartenders, right? So almost every good colleague I had did some of this consulting on the side, or they did cocktail catering as well, or you did cocktail catering for a drinks company, then they asked you to come in and advise them. So there's an awful lot of us at Fridays. And then by having been in London in the early 90s and kept up and read every issue of Class magazine and what became Difford's Guide, and knew the people, and then later on could email them, then even later on could text them, I was riding the crest of this big wave. I knew how to do it, and most people did not. So From the moment I formed Liquid Solutions, which is actually in 1999, I think, I formally founded it as a Dutch limited liability company in Rotterdam. I always had clients, and the only thing that really changed after the 90s was I kind of stopped doing all the cocktail consulting, I stopped doing all the catering, and I was really just full-time concentrating on liquor brands, doing education and engagement for them. Because obviously they wanted to educate bartenders on how to make cocktails, because then you sell more liquor.
Of course, yeah. That was going to be a question: was how did your consulting change? How has it changed from as early as 1999, and as you said, training bartenders too, working with brands, and is that still the same today? Are you still working kind of in the past 10 years that you've been doing it? Is it been pretty much the same as consulting with brands?
Yeah, but the nature of this has kind of changed as well, right? In the beginning, it was just about knowledge. Now, everything you could ever want to learn is online in multiple formats. If you want to learn by listening, there's podcasts. By watching, there's YouTube. By reading, there's, oh my God, so much stuff out there. And I wrote a lot of it myself. So the job of someone like me is in part changed to A, what's the really useful stuff? B, what's the stuff people aren't talking about? C, how can I get this across to people in a way that will amuse them, entertain them, as well as educate them? So the competition to educate and engage people is probably more at a higher level now than ever in the past. And you have to be really good at it. You have to work at it. And me personally in my consulting, in the last 10 years, what's changed is I've done more actual brand creation. So I just created a gin and a spiced rum for a client from scratch, which was fantastic here in the USA. And I'm currently working on an ethnobotanical gin here in the USA, as well as a vodka with a Hollywood celebrity, believe it or not. So I really love doing that because it's a great combination of the stuff I can do in my sleep and the stuff that even I still have to learn. That's the sweet spot of not being complacent and also maybe not being terrified that you're in over your head.
You've just led me in so well to your own spirits now. Well done, Philip. So yes, since you brought up spirits and creating spirits, you have your own spirits.
I do indeed.
So was that always a love of yours or a want to create? Well, how did that come out of that? The longing to create something liquid.
I think everybody who's ever been an employee always thinks they could run the company better. And I can guarantee you, every consultant thinks that, because one of the hardest things about a consultant is getting used to the fact that your clients will hire you and pay you for your advice and love you and then not listen to your advice.
Of course.
So specifically what got me into Genever was I worked on the project, which is actually called Mini Cooper internally, which was creating a new Genever for the Balls Company, right?
Okay.
And I was involved in every aspect of that. The liquid development, I was on the tasting panel, the marketing team. And two things about that project pissed me off and made me think I could do it better. One, they launched at a trade wholesale price in New York in the USA of $40, which was frankly absurd, right? It meant all my friends who had amazing cocktail bars in New York loved the Genever, loved me, but they had to privately pull me aside and say, Phil, I can't put this in a cocktail. It's way too expensive. Right. And the other thing was that they had a, how can I say this politely? They didn't make it. They bought it in, right, from a distillery in Belgium.
Oh, no way.
There's no problem with that. There's great distilleries in Belgium too. But they pretended that they did not. And that was something that really bugged me because I had seen firsthand the rise of Google, cell phones, everything. Not only should you not lie to bartenders, you can't anymore anyway. And I guess they just didn't get that memo. So, being asked to go around and lie to bartenders did not sit well with me. I thought the story was much better if you just said, hey, we buy it in from this amazing family distillery in Belgium. So I was determined to do it right. And I was determined, just as a point of difference, to make it 100% Dutch. Milled, mashed, fermented, distilled, bottled, everything in Holland. There's nothing wrong with Belgium, but I just wanted to be different. And that's where we are today with the award-winning Old Duff Genever.
And was it always going to be... So the Genever idea came from working with bowls or working for bowls. Has there been another spirit that you want to create other than Genever? Ever?
No, I felt that Genever was niche enough that I wouldn't have too much competition. And I don't, thank God. But not too small that we'd never actually sell any. I always wanted the Genever to be a great visiting card, an advertisement for my consulting services, because there's nothing better than me able to say to a client, well, look, I actually put my money where my mouth is, and look, it's in all these 50 best bars, and we've got this sales going, etc., etc. So I felt that was in the sweet spot, and almost any other category would have been more difficult, I feel, as a calling card. But of course, I create brands for clients, and I give them my unvarnished advice. Like if somebody wants a gin, I'm like, are you sure? Because if you're sure, I'll make you an amazing gin. But, you got to be sure.
Of course. Now, naming your Genever, was that difficult to decide?
It's incredibly difficult. When it's your own product, you lose all perspective. And I had an additional problem in that the name that I thought everybody would love, everybody not only did not love, they actively hated it. And that was a bit of a blow to me because I was very good at naming things, from cocktails to seminar titles. Everybody was like, oh my God, Phil's great at this. And suddenly I sucked at coming up with a name for my own Genever. I actually wanted to call it Jerry Thomas Genever. I thought that was a brilliant name. And everyone hated that. So I went down the list, and I had been in Milk and Honey in London, and they had a Genever cocktail on the menu, a Corin Vine cocktail, actually. And I remember texting Martin Duderoff. I still have a screenshot of the text message, who was somebody I knew from New York. I didn't live in New York at the time. I was texting him and I said, there's a Genever cocktail on the menu here at Milk and Honey. Maybe I should start Old Duff Genever. Ha ha ha, lol. And this was years before I had any idea of starting my own Genever brand. So I kind of dusted that off. And as much as I could, I tested it out with people. And everyone loved the name. Partly, I think, I love it because it kind of winks towards whiskey, which is what Genever really is. The word duff is funny in almost every language. In England, of course, duffing someone up or getting them up the duff is about respectively beating somebody up and getting them pregnant. In America, sitting on your behind is called sitting on your duff. And in Dutch, duff with one F means slow or dozy. So it kind of wins on all on all edges. But
and of course, it's your last name.
And it's my last name.
And it's your last name. See, I had no idea there was a story there. And there was a story there. See? Also, I do love your goat story that's on their website. And I know everyone can go to the website, but do tell, because it is heaven.
It is the best. I've actually got some of the alternative designs here. But if you know the oblong shape of a Genever bottle, right? What's called a cellar bottle or a Kelderfles. That was the world's first glass liquor bottle. Because before then, people transported liquor in barrels and, big kind of pitchers. Right? But the Dutch were going off trying to colonize the world, and they would be going to places that didn't have docks or harbors with ramps you could roll a barrel down. So they invented this oblong bottle, and its shape was so that it could be efficiently packed into a case, and you could hand the case down to a rowing boat and then row out to negotiate with the locals or murder them. And if you look at the bottle, it kind of, the shape of it narrows a bit, it widens a bit from the bottom to the top, and it kind of demands, in my opinion anyway, a round circular label at the top. And Genever was so big. It was the world's biggest spirit, being consumed, right up until the first gunshots of World War One. And it was being sold everywhere from Melbourne and Beijing to Buenos Aires, throughout the whole Caribbean. So it didn't matter what language you wrote your label in. Some of your customers wouldn't understand it, but everybody would understand a visual. So they would usually have a round emblem with an animal in it on the logo. So one of the biggest markets was, and is, West Africa. So there's lots of brands there with, elephants and monkeys in the label to communicate brand values. There was a famous brand in the USA before Alaska and Hawaii were added that was a cardinal, because the cardinal bird was present in all the 48 states at the time. And I come from a tiny town near Dublin called Skerries, right? This is the aforementioned tiny town. And Skerries is actually Norwegian for little rocks, because there are 3 tiny little islands just off the coast of Skerries. You can actually walk to them at low tide. And on one of the islands, St. Patrick used to live before he got his promotion to being a saint. He was a Welsh missionary, escaped Roman slave, and he is documented as living in my town. Now, the next bit of the story definitely moves into the field of myth. He had a goat, and he went away one day sainting, and he came home, and the goat was missing. So he said to the locals, my ancestors, hey, guys, did you see my goat? And they're like, oh, no, dude, didn't see your goat. Because, of course, they'd stolen it and eaten it. So now he lines up everyone in the village and curses them. He takes away their voice and replaces it with the bleating of a goat. So just as, like with sports teams, if you're from Minnesota, you're a Viking, and if you're from somewhere else, you're a Raider. If you're from my little town, Skerries, North County, Dublin, you are a goat. So there's a goat in the label of Old Duff Genever.
I love that. He wasn't being very saintly at that point.
You never hear about this side of St. Patrick.
No, it's all drinking and nice and kindness and all of that.
Him and the goat must have been very close.
Just don't tell him where you're from,
That's
right?
it.
If you ever meet him on the street, don't say you're from Skerries.
Well, he's not dangerous. He's Welsh. I mean, seriously. He also, he drove the snakes out of Ireland. That's like me saying, if Charlize Theron ever calls for a date, I'm going to turn her down. I don't think we had a lot of snakes in Ireland.
The 2 snakes.
Yeah.
And probably he got a bad rap for the goat thing. And he's like, well, let me get rid of some snakes and maybe they'll forget the goat thing.
That's it. I mean, he totally killed it on the PR front.
Now, not to completely shift what we were talking about, but I did read somewhere that at one point, and this was a long time ago in 2011, that you were over cocktails. You actually wrote the article for, I think it was Australian Bar,
Yeah.
saying that you went through a crisis of cocktails. And that, no, I didn't like cocktails. Not that I didn't enjoy them, but I lost my cocktail mojo, to quote you exactly. Now, that was a long time ago. And you did then say that you got it back, but not in the same way. And I was wondering kind of what happened. And, this is a long time, this 13 years later. Have you gotten it back? Is it a different kind of mojo? Because you are still so active in this world. We met at the Sustainability Festival, and I saw you at a Sustainability Summit, Paradiso Sustainability Summit, to be exact. And I saw you at Imbibe, and you're constantly going and doing. Is the mojo there?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that mojo journey.
Yeah, but I mean, like a lot of people, it's like, when this cocktail golden age kicked off, and I'm dating it to 1995 in London, it was like you've just staggered across this boiling hot desert and you've come upon a lush, cool oasis, and you jump in the water and start drinking. But after you've had a bit of that water, you start feeling full and bloated and salt water, and maybe you die. So we all just got so into cocktails, and we all became cocktail bartenders who worked in cocktail bars and finished work and drank cocktails. And on your night off, you went to other bars and drank cocktails. And everybody, I think, burns out after about a decade of that. It's certainly something my industry contemporaries, people like Angus Winchester and I discuss. The first thing that you burn out on is citrus, right? Because the first way you make your cocktails taste amazing is just by using fresh lime juice, fresh lemon juice, which, younger listeners, that used to be revolutionary. You could have a career as a consultant, just going around telling people how to squeeze juice and to use it fresh. But after a while, you're like, I cannot have another citrus cocktail. And then you move on to the boozy brown stirred cocktails, but then you burn out on them too. And you just have to, what worked for me, you have to sort of force yourself back into the world. And the way I did it was by looking at menus and choosing the drinks I absolutely did not like the sound of, right? And allowing yourself to be surprised once again. Now, my taste is still more boozy and brown and stirred than it was. And there's so many ongoing developments in the world of cocktails that I have to get used to learning about and going into without preconceived notions, that I might as well enjoy the drink, while I'm having it. Like, I had some brilliant drinks from Alex Cretena at Tayern Elementary while I was in London. And I've known Alex for a very long time indeed, like over, I don't know, maybe 16 years now, maybe longer. And I've seen his style evolve. Which is always interesting when it's a friend of yours doing it. So no, a combination of professional pride and my own curiosity keeps me, still drinking cocktails.
And how about, there was the trend of pre-batched. So, I mean, I remember going into, I won't name a bar, but a bar that really was at the forefront of that. And, them taking something out of the fridge, pouring into a glass over a piece of, no, it wasn't even over a piece of ice because we didn't want ice, and adding something and giving it to me. But there was no, I don't want to say flair, but there was no stirring, there was no shaking, all the stuff that I love. I want the drama. Hey, I was an actress when I was, a long time ago. I love the drama. So, how did you feel about that, being a former bartender? Did you think, oh, this is just cool because they're trying something new? I don't know. I just thought I'd like your opinion on that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It is a development I've watched with worry, right? Because even in the most basic bar, it's essentially a brilliant omakase restaurant, liquid omakase. You go in, you sit at the bar, and even if you just ordered a gin and tonic, there's something about watching any bartender, especially a skilled one, put it together, and especially when it's a great cocktail. And on the other hand, there can be really good reasons to batch partially or entirely. Like, for instance, when The Grill, the bar at the Four Seasons restaurant here in New York City, reopened with Major Food Group, they had Thomas Waugh, who's a very skilled bartender there, and he's like, well, we make lots of martinis. Why don't we just batch the martini and keep it in the freezer? And I guarantee you that makes a better martini than even the finest martini drinkers of the USA would want, because that's how I make martinis here at home. In fact, I batched a martini yesterday with Procera Gin for the annual Herring Festival here in New York. It's a very small herring festival in that we only invite 16 people around, but it's extremely liquid. But at the grill, they also had to keep up with people asking for that stirred martini, because it's a beautiful bit of ballet, especially with a martini.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that balance. The people at the tables don't really give a shit. Right? Although it is still nice to be in a room where you hear the tinkle of shakers and the rattle of ice cubes in a glass. But the people at the bar want it, need it, deserve it. So I feel if you are literally just pouring something, and this goes to places that have a lot of draft cocktails too, you need to put huge emphasis on garnish and presentation, and you, the bartender, had better have a pretty fucking solid game. You gotta have some good banter, as it were, to make up for the liquid theatre that has been omitted. And I think what I do see now is some bars being clever with this. You know, they batch most of a complex cocktail, but they leave one or two ingredients that can be, you know, added and poured. So you still get some theatre. I'm going to be seeing a whole lot of that next week at Tales of the Cocktail, because it's also the world capital of batching. There's like huge parties every day and night, and from the best bars in the world. And they batch everything because it's literally just thousands, crowds of thousands of marauding cocktail drinkers invading your makeshift bar.
And all wanting a fabulous drink.
And all wanting a fabulous drink, even though you're literally pouring drinks in the World War II museum.
And they are being judged even if it's not a competition. You know, everyone knows their game.
Do you want to hear something
so
horrific, Susan? This actually genuinely shocked me. I was discussing the 50 best awards or lists, or whatever, with one of the Academy chairs. And she said, and I was an Academy chair myself for a year or two, and she said, oh no, we've had to introduce a new rule that you have to have been to the bar in order to, you know, if you put it on the list. And I'm like, well, of course you have to have been to the bar. How could you even conceive of judging a bar you haven't visited? She said, oh no, people were going to a pop-up of that bar somewhere else and then saying and judging that bar as if they'd been to the original one, which is a new level of shittiness, if you ask me.
I totally agree with you. You know, it's funny you brought up something that I went at the Sustainability Summit. I don't know if you saw Alex James speak, because he has this new thing in Paris he's doing. But he said one of the things they had, like the 5 things they hate about the industry right now, and one is pop-ups. Or should we say not pop-ups, but takeovers. And that, and I was just wondering how you feel about those. I think it's fun for me because I get to go to the Donovan bar. They do a lot of takeovers. I get to meet people. Obviously, I get to try the drinks from the place. Not that I would think that I had been to the bar, and if I were a judge, you know.
For listeners, I'm rolling my eyes now.
Add it to the list. But how do you feel? You know, would you consult? Would you tell one of your brands to do pop-ups or work with people, or, you know, to not pop-ups? I'm sorry, takeovers. I keep saying pop-ups. I mean takeovers.
Yeah. Look, it used to be that they were not only popular but necessary to disseminate knowledge, because we didn't have email and cell phones and high-speed internet, right? So brands, you know, back in the 90s were flying bartenders around. And they'd fly.
I had no idea.
Yeah. They'd fly bartenders from London to New York and all this kind of thing. And it was like, oh, holy shit, it's Dale DeGruff. You know? So they had a very different function back then. Now, everybody and their dog is doing them. And there's nothing wrong with a pop-up, a takeover, a guest shift, however you want to call it, so long as you execute it well. But so often, it's one drunk bartender in a t-shirt, sloppily making drinks from his bar, and counting the minutes until he can go and drink beer and shots with his mates, right?
Thank God I haven't been to those.
I've
been to the.
No,
I've been to the
look, I think
ones.
as a brand, as a bar or as a brand, you should use them selectively, right? Like coming back to our friends at Paradiso, they had a pop-up in New York City here at Mace a while back, and I went along. They're friends. And so is everybody at Mace, head bartender Evgeny, Nico De Soto, the owner Greg Boehm. It's a great place. And this might have been one of the 2 or 3 best pop-ups I have ever seen in my whole life. And the reason was, quite frankly, they thought about it more and spent more money on it, courtesy of Altamura Distilleries, their sponsor, who were a big sponsor down at Tales as well. So, first of all, they had 3 or 4 staff members. They had 2 bartenders, as a minimum, I think. And they had Margarita, the co-founder, working the floor. And they had music that made you feel like you're in Barcelona. There was one guy from Mace making drinks if you wanted the Mace drinks. They had done a pop-up somewhere else the night before. So those bartenders came along and really partied hard. Margarita delivered every drink to the table and added a finishing touch to every drink at the table, which made the experience better for people at the table. Like they had a foam she would carry through the whole place and then pluck some off and pop it on your drink. And it was like that for every drink. So you got an amazing experience whether you were standing at the bar, seated at the bar, seated at a table. It just had the exuberance of a night in Paradiso. Or, as I was discussing, probably the best of all time was when Dead Rabbit did a pop-up at Claridge's for 4 or 5 days. It reportedly cost about $90,000, but because they actually ran it as a commercial bar, I believe they broke even on all of it and had to fly all the staff members over, and they had actual sawdust on the floor, but they literally built a dead rabbit inside Claridge's. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to cost that much more than, just having one bartender. Like if I would say a minimum of 2 bartenders, have a music playlist, do it for at least 4 to 5 hours, right? You can get away with 3 hours in the afternoon. Dante in New York do that very successfully. Have somebody making the drinks of the normal menu so you don't alienate the customers. And, take the time. It's better to do, I think, 4 pop-ups a year that are that good than, 8 or 12 that are markedly less good.
And that is free advice from Philip Duff. So anyone listening,
brands, who to get in
has
touch
a bar. With. Yeah. Now back to you.
My favorite topic.
Yes, of course. So out of all of these years that you've been working, is there, one thing or 2 things that just, have either made you so love what you're doing or appreciate the chance you've been given that you can tell me? Something that you might have not discussed with anyone before?
Well, I met my wife at Tales of the Cocktail, so if I hadn't stayed in the industry and been a consultant and also had no dinner plans that evening, I wouldn't be living in the US as I have been for over a decade now. And I wouldn't be a stepfather. That was a real bonus. I like to say my wife is like a bottle of premium liquor. She's expensive, mature, and she comes with a small version of her hanging around her neck, who is now, by the way, 19 years old. So I am now the stepfather of something approaching adulthood.
Wait till she's 21. Then the education begins, right?
I just want to drink. It's that thing that, her dad and her stepdad are bar owners, or in my case, ex-bar owner. He still is. Her mom is Elaine Duff, who is the global head of advocacy for Heaven Hill. I'm me. The only normal parent she has is her stepmom, who's a school teacher. So she has the occasional White Claw, but I think she's embarrassed by the fact that we drink cocktails.
That will soon change, hopefully.
I hope so.
So that's one, meeting your wife. That is a glorious one. I do love that. Is there anything else from your whole history of working?
Honestly, nothing. I mean, just a rich tapestry of experiences. Like, I've been to, I guess, probably 80 countries by now, teaching, and I would have some years, like pre-COVID even, that I would visit maybe 40 countries a year. And it's incredible. My career just took me to a new country. I went to Armenia for the first time just a few weeks ago for Yerevan Cocktail Week, which is coming back in 2025. Yerevan Cocktail Week, everybody. That's a huge privilege, and I don't take it lightly. You get to meet people, build networks, and it's just amazing. I sometimes have to remind myself that this is a job, a real job, right? That I basically get paid to talk, either behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, and sometimes both. But it's basically education, which I've always been interested in, and especially combining my knowledge, which, you know, I still keep up to date and read the new books and go to the new bars, enables me to be what I call bilingual. I can speak to brands and know how to speak to them because they've got pretty much the same marketing degree I have. But then I can talk to and about bars and bartenders, and I understand them too because of my background in it. And I think a crucial part of the job of a consultant is just translating between those two entities, if you will, and being unafraid to tell the truth to both of them, right? And that might mean that you have to tell a client, like, look, I don't think you should do a pop-up. I don't think you should sponsor this. No, I mean, come to Tails, but don't do anything the first year except just hang around, shake hands, and kiss babies, right? And the same advice for bars. I get lots of bars asking me, you know, how to get in the awards, the lists, this kind of thing. And I say to them, it's like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you want to get on this train? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that loving to talk led you to start your own podcast as well.
I did.
You just didn't talk enough. You wanted to talk some more.
Yeah. Well, what I found was, I think probably, so actually I, served, didn't really know him very well. Not, what's his name? The guy who invented podcasting, Adam Curry. Because Adam Curry,
yeah,
is sort of American Dutch, and he lived in Amsterdam. He's a big celebrity there. He'd come in some of the bars
no
that I
way.
worked at. And I remember podcasting back then, right? And you had to have an iPod, and you had to get some weird thing. I didn't actually listen to any of them. And I saw podcasting die off, but lots of things die off, like leggings and stuff. And then it came back. It came raging back. And I was actually on a podcast in Tokyo, right? And it was American podcasters. I was recording it in Tokyo at the headquarters of the Japan Sake Shochu Makers Association. And before we started, I said, guys, you seem to know your stuff. How did podcasting come back? And they just looked at me and said, Serial, which was a podcast about a serial killer.
Yep.
And it has just come back. And so I listened to some, and they're all really good. They're all really structured and planned, like yours, I think. And they've got intro music, outro music, little sound effects. And I thought, what if we didn't do any of this? And I just had a few drinks with my friends, and we taped it, and we chased down every rabbit hole, like some of the very long form ones you see, like, you know, Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan or something. I would just have a bit of fun without an agenda. And that's really what my podcast is. And the longest episodes are the ones that people like the best. They're the ones that people come up to me in airports and say, oh, I listened to the one you did with Rachel Harrison, or I listened to the one you did with Dusan Zarek. That was my favorite. Can you do more long versions of it? And I'll be taping a bunch of them next week in sweaty New Orleans. I'm actually taping in the mornings before we go to Tails. So people are going to have breakfast with me in my apartment. Then we'll tape for a few hours, and then we'll go to Tails. I think that's much better than doing it at the end of the day.
As long as it's not too early.
No,
They
no.
may
We're
not
starting
show
at 9
up.
a.m. Starting at 9 a.m.
Yeah, you know, I don't even know. I remember I listened to This American Life. I did listen to Serial. And I just had this, I was at a bar in Italy. I was there as a journalist writing about the hotel. The bartender had a really great story. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there are any podcasts. And I started mine like 9 years ago. So
Whoa.
There were like two. And they were both US. And they were both like B2B. And there wasn't really anything for consumers. So, and there were only, at that time, 250,000 podcasts worldwide, because I was invited to speak at a travel bloggers conference about podcasting. It was packed, and I did some research, and in 1 year it had doubled to 500,000 podcasts. That's why I remember, because I was like, in 1 year it doubled, so guys, get on this train. Now they're like 5 million podcasts. Over lockdown, a lot of people started them, obviously, because no one knew what to do. But yeah, I was one of the first. And it's great to have people talking about, you know, as many people who can talk about stuff. I learn stuff every day from people. So I was listening to a couple years. I love the long form. Diary of a CEO over here is the #1 podcast, I think, in the world. His he speaks for at least 2 hours on each topic. I highly recommend it if you haven't heard it. So the long form is definitely, it doesn't surprise me that people like it being really long. So yeah, so saying that, so what other than podcasting, you've got your everything that you're doing, are you just continuing to do what you do? Do you see something new coming up in the future?
No. I'm always threatening to write a book. That hasn't happened, but I do want to publish. It'll probably be like maybe even a free download, a Genever cocktail book, because I realized it's great having all the classics like the Collins, the Old Fashioned, the Improved Holland Gin Cocktail, the Martinez. But after that, because it is still a niche category, bartenders get a little bit stumped, even the very best bartenders, because they're having difficulty categorizing Genever. And since we launched 6 years ago, we've had like amazing cocktails created by the likes of Dale de Groff and Souther Teague and Beach Bum Berry and indeed Alex Cretena. So I want to put them all in a book so people can see that and go, aha, and be inspired by the very, very different takes that people have put on Genever cocktails, from, hot drinks to creamy drinks to all that kind of thing. So that's one thing. There's so many good books about the industry and the and spirits now. I don't really see me writing another one. Like, I have this stack of books, like just the books my friends have written and sent me a copy. And I make sure if you give me a book, I will read it. But I'm like, I just don't know what I could contribute in that. What I do really like doing is starting brands as a consultant, as maybe an equity owner as well, and getting them out there in the world and making them successful. So there's a degree of financing needed with that. I can't supply that, unfortunately, but all the other expertise, doing things differently to the big companies, because they are their own worst enemies. They can't come up structurally with new brands anymore, because any new idea dies death by 1,000 cuts, because everybody wants to have their fingerprints on a project just in case it's successful. But all that input from people who don't have the managerial power to say, let's do this or let's not do this, kills brands. And then you get 17 flavor of Baileys, but nobody's invented a Baileys from a big company in the last 60 years. In fact, there's only 3 brands in the 148 or so best-selling brands in the world that were invented in-house by a big company in the last 60 years. One is Baileys, the other one is Malibu, and the third one, all credit to the people from Tennessee, is Woodford Reserve. And that's that's obviously a terrifying statistic, but that's where the likes of me play, because I work in teams. Sometimes it's just me, or there's no more than 4, 5, 6 people, so we can all get in a phone call and make a decision on the spot. And that, I think, is the sweet spot. And then the brand gets acquired by a big company and we all buy yachts.
Right, exactly.
And then they fuck up the brand.
Right, especially the one that you're doing for the celebrity.
Yeah, he's a very cool celebrity. I'm looking forward to being able to talk about that publicly.
Well, this has been really fabulous. I really appreciate it. I end with, and I'm going to ask you the 2 questions. I haven't asked these for a while, but I was wondering if you have a top tip for the home bartender that isn't about fresh ice, because everyone says ice. So Dan with no ice.
Batch all your cocktails. Batch them all,
okay.
Right? The reason you go to a bar to have that omakase experience is because it's a pain in the tits to do it at home. Right, to make drinks to order. So batch your martinis, batch all your cocktails ahead of time. Add in lieu of stirring or shaking them, just add in 25% of the liquid volume as water. Give it a good old mix, put it in a bottle, put it in the freezer or the fridge if it's relatively low in alcohol, and you'll be able to serve the most amazing cocktails at all your get-togethers and just pour them out like wine, and you'll have time to actually concentrate on your guests. It'll make you a better host.
I love that. And if you could be anywhere drinking anything right now, what would that be and where would it be?
Ooh, I kind of like to drink a Holland razor blade with Charles H. Baker Jr. in what is now Jakarta in the 1930s. Because he wrote about getting drunk with a bunch of KLM pilots. He was a very, very well-travelled guy by all accounts. That's the cocktail that's actually on the cover of the Oxford Companion to Spirits and Cocktails, right next to an antique bottle of Genever, because it's a Genever cocktail. So it's a pleasure to be a contributor to the Oxford Companion. I wrote several of the entries, including the one on Genever. And the Holland Razor Blade, with its inventor in his era when he was a young man, in the place where it was invented, that'd be pretty special.
That sounds fab. I would too. I'd join you with that. All right. I will leave you to go and conquer the world. And hopefully see you soon. Or conquer tales.
Yeah, let's take it 1 week at a time. Hopefully I'm going to survive. Thanks very much for having me on. It's been tremendous fun.
It has been great. And I will see you soon, I hope.